Welcome back to another episode of the Cinema Retro Podcast. I'm your host, Miles Stephenson, and this time around I sat down with director Ross Partridge, actor Jennifer Lafleur, and producer Kelly Frazier. We discussed their new psychological horror film, Birthright. It's about a young couple who moves to a small town, and in that town there's a curse that threatens the life of their unborn child. I think what's interesting about this episode is it shows you a day in the life of a run-and-gun indie filmmaker. It shows you the different challenges that you will face if you try to make your own indie film, like shooting with dwindling light and controlling animals on set and all the different practical things that they have to go through to get the movie made. We also discuss the state of the movie-making business in Los Angeles and favorite films from the 70s like Harold and Maude, A Woman Under the Influence, and Giant. I hope you enjoy. Hello, everyone. Thank you guys for joining the Cinema Retro Podcast today. Super excited about our guests. We have Ross, Jen, and Kelly from the new horror movie Birthright. It's streaming now on Apple TV. I highly recommend it. All of you guys should go watch it. And super privileged to have all of these great creative people here today.
Thanks for having us.
This town needs some new life.
You know what happened here, right? All these kids went missing. There was a coven of witches.
They came for all our children. I don't know what it wants with you, but it can't be good.
Yeah, so to start out, how about each of you just introduce yourselves, talk about a little bit about your role on the film, and tell us about what you do.
My name is Ross Partridge. I am the director and one of the producers of the film, and yeah.
I'm Jennifer Lafleur, and I am an actor in the movie and also a co-producer on the movie.
And I am Kelly Frazier, and I was one of the producers.
Amazing. And so,
Really
first,
the producer.
the main producer?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Kelly's
The
on
movie
the
wouldn't have happened without that lady right there.
Well, or you two. I mean, it was definitely a team sport on this one.
A small team sport.
Yeah, so I guess that could be our first question is, what was seemed like a thing that was a passion project that all of you guys came together and made this happen, and it's a smaller production. What were some of the challenges of that, working with a smaller team and kind of figuring stuff out by the sweat of your brow?
It feels very loaded, doesn't it? Initially we kind of raced to get this film off the ground before the actors strike. Was it the actor strike? Yeah,
The writer's strike and the actor's strike.
Yeah.
We were kind of beating those deadlines.
We were kind of in a mad crunch, and Kelly and I and Jen were looking for a project to do. We had been kind of developing another one, and we found this script that a friend of ours wrote. And this was in February, on my birthday, actually, February 26th, we all had dinner and found the script. And then we were like, all right, well, maybe we should do this before the strike, which took us into March, trying to do rewrites really quickly. Kelly and I and the other producer went out and scouted, and then literally from when did we get to? We literally started June 1st.
Yeah,
so,
we got there like mid-May.
Yeah, so pre-pro was extremely expedited and short, if you wouldn't even call it that. It was just Kelly, Jen, and myself in a small farm town near Jen's, right next to Jen's house where she grew up, or not house, but the town in which she grew up. Mm-hmm. So it was all just kind of a run and gun and trying to beat the deadline for the strike, which subsequently got extended. So we were kind of on our own made up time frame, and so it was just all hands on deck, trying to get as many community people to help out, and that's what we did. We had locations that were given to us and locations that we had known right down the road, and basically we're like, let's try to make this happen.
Awesome. Kelly, what were some of the challenges about shooting on location? Because that's kind of a bold choice for production. So, what were some of the challenges?
Well, on this one, it actually turned out to be great because we shot on a farm literally right next to Jen's parents' house. So it was, we walked down the street when we were scouting to this really great horse farm. And we had some of the crew stay in the house where we were shooting, and that house was sort of our main set. And we really only went away from that house for a week, I think, wasn't it? When we shot at the hospital and around town. But for the most part, we shot all at the same location. And it really was like going back to, it was almost like summer camp the way we shot this thing, which was super fun. So, it was not having a budget really of any sort, always makes it hard. But in this case, it kind of worked. We couldn't have afforded to shoot it on a soundstage, and in this case, it actually worked out well because Jen grew up in that town. She knew everybody. If we were in the middle of an emergency, Jen could say, "Oh, let me call my friend, whoever," and they could take care of it. Her dad was a doctor there for years, and her mom works at the fire department. She's been a EMT for years, so they literally know somebody to fix everything. So it was
Very cool.
actually great.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
yeah, yeah.
Man, what can we hear a bit about your hometown? What it's like? Where is it?
Yeah, it's a very small town. I think it's just a couple thousand people, maybe a little bit bigger now, but when I was growing up there, I think it had less than 2,000 people. My mom is the chief of the ambulance squad and a paramedic, firefighter. So she's worked on the fire department for many years, and I think she's been the chief of the ambulance squad for like 48 years or something crazy like that. And my dad is the local emergency room doctor. So, when we needed an ER to shoot in, not only did we get access to the actual emergency room that he worked in for over 30 years, but my dad plays one of the doctors, and it's his actual ER nurse team that plays the ER nurses
That he worked
for
with
the
for-
scene when Ren has to go into the hospital.
Wow.
And when we needed a ambulance outside of one of the locations, my mom kind of drove it over and stood outside to be background for that. And
The cop car, they
when
just
we
parked,
needed,
parked in the driveway and be like, here, just call us when you're done.
they
And I
just
was
like, here are the keys.
Great.
Let us know.
That's
They're like,
hilarious.
oh, you're Jenny Lafleur. You're Donna's daughter. You're Roger's daughter. Sure, whatever you need. We needed a goat, and my friend from high school was like, I'll bring one right over. So it was a true community effort where tons of people from the town and community not only donated their time as extras for the movie, but also really helped us out with locations, connecting us with a piano teacher, with kids to use for the movie. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, we told them it was a Christmas movie, so subsequently we are no longer allowed in the town. But that's what you have to do.
Shout out to Jen's parents. Those are very supportive parents.
Yes,
They were very crucial, and her dad has a big wood shop and an apple barn in an apple barn, and basically that became our production headquarters where we would stow like equipment and our costumes. Basically, just put up 2 desks, and then started making costumes. And so it was like
He's also an unbelievable cook. So we would go to their house for dinner and have the best meals too. It was great.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
they're a dynamic duo for sure.
So Ross, could I ask you about some of your visual influences for the movie? Where you got the idea for the style?
I mean, without sounding like arrogant or it's one of those things where it's just, I think the material calls to certain things, and then you have an idea of what you want it to visually look like. Our DP Shaheen is a dear friend as well, and he's got he's such an artist and has a beautiful artistic eye, so I leaned on him heavily. But we both we both like just a lot of photography and a lot of portraiture photography, and we felt that a lot of the originally we intended it was going to be in a lot, like almost two different, lots of wides and extreme close-ups. Like we had this whole idea where we wanted to go extreme close-up and macro, and a lot of just the coverage of obviously Ren and trying to get into her, into her emotional state and how she's viewing everything that's happening around her. So it was pretty, we kind of talked about that a lot and how we could try to do that. That said, timing and everything else, we couldn't quite adhere to the things that we really wanted to try because just of schedule and trying to get those things and, on a small budget. But, a lot of our favorite stuff as far as the visual elements to it, we ran around on our days off shooting stuff. We ran around with the drone shooting stuff. We just kind of just wanted to saturate as much as you can, and especially on a budget like this, if you have the luxury of being able to, because it's your friend that you're working with and he cares just as much as we all do, then we can, be like Saturday morning, yeah, let's just go the two of us and just go around and grab stuff because that's what we love to do, and that's the real fun of it. That's the beauty of doing a small movie like this. But as far as the style, like saying a pinpointed reference, Shaheen has a deep knowledge of many films that he loves, and so do I, and we can, go back to some of like the weirder kind of elements to it, just kind of like the shift, the locking tilt shift kind of scape that happened was a kind of an afterthought in post that kind of we knew that we wanted to have some sort of like above ground kind of viewpoint of this little town, and then make it almost even more askew. I like a lot of like abstract photography where it's a lot of like blurred imagery and kind of not so immediate, and so that just happened in post, and we kind of were playing around with the idea of making it almost feel like a miniaturette of all these like sets, that it was almost like a piece that happened. But it was through like actually our colorist kind of like started playing with it, and he brought us to our attention. We were like, oh yeah, that's exactly, that really helps the world and builds that kind of thing that we were going after in the first place. So
Oh, I really like that, and I like the at very dramatic moments, you'd have a close up on one of the actors' face, and then you have a cutaway of the aerial kind of foggy forest. It reminded me almost of Twilight. They have that they have those drone shots to establish the location. I thought that added a really good sense of mood and kind of ambiance. Kelly, my next question is for you. So as we talked a little bit before we started recording, I'm also a producer, and I feel like people don't know what producers do. Directors, it's very obvious. They direct the movie. Actors, they're what the camera at. And producers, it's like, so what do you do? Like, what does producing a movie mean? So could you just tell us a little bit about your kind of big responsibilities going into the picture and what that was like?
Everything. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all on the producer. I mean, we have to make sure the script, work with the director to make sure the script is in good shape, and then we have to break the script down, figure out how many days it's going to take to shoot it, then figure out how we're going to pay for it, then start to put together the cast and the crew, find all the locations, deal with all the legal stuff, all the location releases, all the boring stuff is what producers do. So it's fun to work with a director like Ross and co-producer and actor like Jen, because it really was fun to get to be part of do all that boring stuff so you can get to the space to do the fun stuff. And Ross was super collaborative, which is always fun to have a director that you can be collaborative with. But yeah, you do all of that to get to set, then you shoot it and try to make your days, and then afterwards, I mean, literally, Ross and I were breaking down tents, hosing down because it rained the whole last night. We were hosing down all the tents. I mean, we were definitely in it on this. But at the end of the day, if you have a budget like this, it's still the producer's responsibility to make sure you return all the equipment in good order and all of that. And then afterwards, we got to follow up on the tax credit and get all that paperwork done. And then there's post and everything that comes with post. And then you find a distributor and you've got to deal with all the deliverables. So it's from the very beginning to the very end, for sure.
And
It's so much work. The amount of paperwork that you never expect on a film, you're
Yeah.
watching something so visual and you're like, oh, there's so much legality and so much paperwork that goes behind it. And that's the stuff that usually, you need a lot of in a bigger budget. It's a luxury to have those kind of, backup. But Kelly had to really endure all that. And Jen is just as far as like, wrangling people's Social Security, like getting continual conversations with agents, getting the paperwork done, the contracts done, contracts agreed to, certain languages in the contracts, going back to lawyers. So there's so much, that goes into just the behind, getting a movie made. And, the legal world makes, like in any business, it just really impedes upon the process.
Figuring out dietary restrictions.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's becoming a bigger and bigger job every year. It made me want to ask people before we start working with them, how difficult are you to feed? Are we going to have to provide a separate, special, handcrafted meal for you 3 times a day for 3 weeks?
I've heard it described before, and you guys tell me if this is how it worked in your particular case, that the director's primary role is to work with the actors, and the producer's primary role is to work with kind of the crew and the mechanics of getting everything together. Would you say that that's a pretty fair characterization?
Yeah, I'd say so in most cases. I mean, Ross was also a producer, so he also had to worry about all of that stuff too. And I think, a good director like Ross knows how important it is to have good relationships with the crew as well, because they will take care of you if you take care of them. So, but yeah, I'd say that's a good line.
That's interesting, Ross. You had to wear both hats. Did you feel like sometimes you're trying to direct and you're like, wait, got to put on my producer hat and handle this?
I mean, truthfully, I think any director should be knowledgeable of wearing that other hat, just for the sake of how to efficiently move across your days and your whole shooting schedule. Like, it's so important that you maintain the sense of schedule, the sense of pace, all those other things that can, there's so many things that can that can bring down a movie when you're in it, that can just kind of derail the whole thing. So I think it's just a natural thing that you have to have both. I believe that. I think you have to be aware. You have to, as a director, you have to be aware of everything. It's not just. And I think there probably are, and Kelly, you probably know more than I, but I think there are probably directors who just are kind of in the process and all about the process and all about the craft and the art of it and all that. But I think that it only can, especially at this budget, you just can't exist that way.
Yeah. And something Kelly and I would talk about a lot is okay, how do we get Ross to put the producer hat aside so that he can just focus on directing? Okay, our day's about to start. What can we take off of his plate so that he can really just focus on being a director?
That's very interesting.
Yeah, and that's part of our job as producers, is to give him a sandbox that he can play in and try to take every other worry off of his plate when we're on set.
Exactly.
Jen, can we go into spoilers now, or do you guys want to keep this spoiler free?
We can go into spoilers.
No, we can go into spoilers.
Okay. Okay. So Jen, big surprise is you are the villain of the movie, basically. And you play a very, I have to imagine, a hard character to get into the mindset of, because you're kind of playing 2 characters. You're playing one person who's presenting themselves one way, but then that character even has layers to herself, because she is actually different than who she originally presents. So it's
Right.
almost like you're acting 2 different roles.
Yeah.
What was that kind of like, getting into the mindset of that?
It was so fun. I don't often get to play the bad guy. I feel like I'm usually playing the mom or the best friend, or the straight-laced person, like lawyers, doctors, that kind of vibe. So this was really, really fun, because that was fit very much in with Rosalie's initial appearance, as she's the midwife. She's very nurturing. She's very caring. And then slowly you kind of start to see it unwind and feel something a little unsettling, and then it really takes the turn when they are in the living room together, and they're on the couch. And I think that was my favorite scene to play, just kind of like the slipping from one right into the other and trying to marry those two different characters together so that it didn't seem like it was a totally different person, but it was definitely a very marked shift into different territory where she was done pretending and done playing around, and she had to do what she had to do at that moment.
And you were very creepy in that scene.
Totally.
And she hasn't come out of it either.
I'm just gonna stay in character.
Yeah,
For
and
what you wish for.
where did you get the kind of visual ideas for the villain? I guess this is a question for all of you. The killing with the antler, I thought that was really interesting and unique. I hadn't seen that design before, because you're in this rural setting, and there's a hunter character, and you're kind of playing off nature and the witch and the mysticism aspect of it. So how did you guys get the antler idea?
I think it was in the script.
Yeah, I think it was in the script for sure.
It was so fun. I mean, that's the fun part of horror films are the props. The sets and the props. So I just remember seeing Ross going through tons of different antlers to find the right antler, and then coming up,
That felt good in my hand, as if I was going to kill somebody.
Yeah, no, that was really interesting. Did you guys? Because I've heard some people describe this online as folk horror. Yeah. And other people have described it as pregnancy horror, which I wasn't even aware that was a subgenre.
Yeah.
Do you guys see kind of a main inspiration from other horror films? I immediately think of Rosemary's Baby or something like Midsummer. What was kind of the raw materials that you were borrowing from?
One of my first jobs was on an Amityville horror, speaking of being in Long Island. But, I kind of studied a bunch of stuff before we got into it. I mean, obviously I looked at Hereditary as a more modern kind of, but I've always been kind of, David Lynch, like just the psychological aspect was always much more intriguing to me than the actual full out gore aspect of this. So it was like really just kind of creating more psychological imagery that like felt more daunting than just a slasher film. Rosemary's Baby, I watched, of course, and there were other films that the violence was like something that we were kind of a little bit we don't come from this space, so we were kind of like, oh, we're going to try this on and see if this works, and hopefully we're just going to make everything around it feel in the world that makes it scary without having, I think we were even talking about it, Kel, we were just kind of like, the hits are going to be in and out. We weren't going to like linger on the violent kind of portion of it. One, in a low budget film, you really like, having effects and trying to create that world. It's challenging. I admire people who do it because there's a lot of technical things that go into it. So we kind of were trying to just build the world, and we were much more intrigued by the psychological world and the weirdness and the, even like the scene that Jen was talking about. To me, that was a much more horror element than actually seeing somebody get killed. It's just like the horror of human behavior was really much more fascinating.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite scenes was when the kid comes to the piano lesson, and they bring the little relic. I don't know what you would call it, a talisman.
Oh, yeah, talisman.
Yeah, and then you realize that actually that her regular student canceled today, and this is some random kid, and then it runs out. And there was no violence in that scene, but it was one of the most disturbing ones in the whole movie because, like you said, it has that psychological aspect of, wait, what's going on? There's this whole behind-the-scenes world that our character's not aware of that's working behind her back and kind of deceiving her. It's very creepy.
Yeah, it's always the things that you have to imagine it or isn't apparent, and you have to just dive right in and kind of be absorbed into the mystery of it, and that's what keeps suspense and builds tension, I think. And as opposed, because we really were just like, all right, that stuff's great. and all that stuff was in the script. There was a lot of those great moments. I think that kind of where the guys, the writers Patch and Aaron, where they come from is a storytelling base. They're not. I don't think they're real horror like fanatics, but they also know the genre much better than I did. And there was one point I had to ask them. I came out and I was like, like the demon, like you got to tell me what the motivation is. How do I work off of this? What is the motivation? And they're like, he's a demon. It's a demon. That's what they do. I'm like,
demons be demons.
They really, and how do you kill them? Well, you just kill them. I'm like, so you can just kill them, like however, like it all was very confusing to me.
It's like we make up the rules.
We make up the rules. Okay, any rules exist? It's hard coming from an acting space where you're like, I need motivation. I need to know what the motivation is and trying to, figure that out. But
I think the casting of the kid was brilliant. That was a kid that lived down the street from Jen's parents, so she was a local and never been in anything before. And I think her, because she was a new actor, and her a little bit of awkwardness made it perfect. Made her absolutely perfect for that role.
Yeah, no, that was a super creepy character and scene and everything. Kelly, we were talking a little bit before we started about how shooting locations have changed in the past 30 years, and people aren't shooting in LA as much, and people are going to these other. Could you talk a bit about, as a producer, I guess, what that's like of Hollywood and LA being decentered as the main place where everything's done?
Yeah, I mean, we chase the tax incentives basically. I mean, we haven't been able to afford to shoot in LA. When you go places like Canada and in Massachusetts, they had a great tax incentive, which was, a big reason for us to shoot there. You just can't leave that money on the table, especially when you're doing low budget movies. You need every dollar you can get. So it just sadly doesn't make sense for us to be able to stay at home and shoot anymore. So I haven't been home in about 7 years, really, because we've been shooting everywhere but LA. So, fingers crossed the recent tax incentives will help, but it's going to be a few years before we all start doing that again. But yeah, it just comes down to dollars and cents.
yeah.
It's very interesting, and luckily with this project, it helped to not shoot it in LA, so it kind of worked with the setting and the story. But yeah, I'm sure there are some projects where it would be easier to shoot in LA, but they have to go to Czech Republic or Atlanta or somewhere else.
Well, I think also that, with the tax incentive on a budget this level, or even small, I mean, I would say lower budget movies up into let's just say independent films, like, even though we have a new tax incentive that's going to help out here and keep, filming at home in LA or in California, it still is going to be absorbed a lot by those big studio movies. It's not, it's still going to be really hard for independent movies to obtain that, because those big movies, the reason that they're leaving is they're getting 50% back on their money or whatever. So if they're spending, $100 million, or it's a $200 million budget, and they're getting 100 and making it for 100, you start trickling that down. Where's a $7 million movie going to come from at that point? So it's going to be, we're still going to have to be traveling for independent films.
Yeah, for a while.
Hopefully the Stay in LA campaign will continue to build more and more momentum, and we will get more of that support, because I think it's necessary, and it's so desired by people who work in the industry. Yes, it can be fun to travel to work on a film, but when you have a home and a family and schools, and it's a lot more to kind of think about and to juggle a normal life. It's really hard to live any sort of normal type of lifestyle.
Could you tell us a bit about that, Jen, the Stay in LA campaign?
Yeah, the Stay in LA campaign is actually kind of being led by one of the people who's leading it is the wife of our cinematographer, Shaheen Seth. Her name is Sarah Dina Smith, brilliant actress. We've worked with her.
Brilliant director.
She was an actress, actually. But yes, brilliant director. One of my favorite directors that I've ever worked with. And she really started to kind of try to focus and hone in on how do we get the state of California to provide these tax incentives and among other incentives to keep productions here in town. And I think that a lot of us we're just wholeheartedly behind it. I mean, it's a huge swath of people who have kind of signed the motion, and that really led to the recent tax incentive that Governor Newsom introduced. So
Awesome.
I'm hopeful that that campaign will just kind of continue to build more momentum, and as we see, little wins, it will hopefully kind of, snowball into a more prevalent filming community, like back in LA again.
Yeah.
That's great.
The optimism is,
Cautious.
I'm less optimistic, but
About everything.
Well-
So.
But it's also, we can make any place look like any place, So, like, I just shot Vancouver for Texas, and, it doesn't really look like Texas, but it looks Hollywood, Texas. So,
Right.
it works.
Yeah.
we could use your house though. You have to show us the rest of your house because
That's
that
right.
might be a perfect location.
You guys are welcome anytime to shoot here. Kelly, speaking of Texas, we were talking a bit about your favorite films, and you mentioned Giant to me. I was out in Texas last week on a shoot. That was my first time to South Texas, and it was all like deserts and cattle. It was kind of reminding me of that movie Hell or High Water. But yeah,
Where were you?
I flew into Houston, then I drove down to Corpus Christi, and then last in San Antonio. So it was like a full week of shooting. But it was it was really really cool landscape, and I just kept thinking of Giant and the way that they use Marfa, Texas, and that it's almost like another character. Can you tell us a bit about your experience with that movie and why you like it so much?
I mean, being a Texan, you just grow up watching that movie, and it just feels so familiar. So I don't know, it's just always a part of our, family watching history. And then coincidentally, some of my first movies I did were out in that area around Marfa, Alpine, down in Lajitas. And when we still shot on film and had to drive the film cans up to El Paso, fly them counter to counter to LA, have them developed, and we would get VHS tapes back to put in our VCRs to watch dailies, 5 days later. It was crazy. But anyway, I ended up getting sidetracked by a cowboy for a few years out in that area right around Marfa, and ended up opening a restaurant, and we named the restaurant Riata because that was the name of the ranch in Giant. So it's just part of the fabric of being a Texan. So I just love the characters, and it was iconic actors. Liz Taylor and James Dean and Rock Hudson, and it also actually tackled some topics that weren't talked about back then. There was the Mexican ranch hand, and it actually did kind of dip a toe into having important conversations.
Yeah.
What was the cowboy's name? Can we ask?
Jet Rink.
What was it?
Jet Rink.
Jet Rink.
Mm-hmm.
Jet Rink.
That's a perfect name.
Yeehaw.
No, that's the cowboy in the movie. That's James Dean, right?
Oh, are you asking about my cowboy?
Yeah.
Oh, that's bourbon. That's over some bourbon.
I'm just hoping it's a good cowboy name.
That's good. There's so many great moments in Giant. I love when Elizabeth Taylor sits down with Rock Hudson and she read about Texas last night. She's the first character who's not from Texas, and she's like, okay, so I read this last night, the Alamo history, and it looks like you guys stole it from Mexico. And he gets so pissed, and he's like doesn't want to talk to her. That's just it's a very iconic movie, and so that's why I wanted to ask you about it. I guess Jen. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was just gonna say I love that scene too, where they bring their the Mexican ranch hand into a restaurant and they get kicked out, and Rock Hudson stands up for the cowboy and they leave, and that was a big deal back then, and I love that scene.
It's great. Jen, you mentioned to me one of your influences is a woman under the influence, the Cassavetes film with Gina Rollins. Can you tell us a bit about why you like that movie?
I mean, Gina Rollins' performance in it is just a true tour de force. It's so alive and electric, and you just never know what you're going to expect at any second with her. And I feel like it's so indicative of the freedom that she felt, within her relationship with Cassavetes. And obviously, being in a relationship where it's a director and actor, like we've worked together as a director and actor,
Not drunk, though.
you always kind of like, to look at that kind of relationship, like between Cassavetes and Gina Rowlands, it's just so unique, and I don't know if I've ever seen that kind of dynamic since. And the way that she's able to just do anything and everything, Ross is always pushing me outside of my boundaries and having me do things in a different way. We have incredibly similar sensibilities, but also very different ways of approaching material. So I have, one way of approaching the material, which sometimes works, and then other times he wants me to like really completely flip it on its head, whether it was in this movie or something else that we've worked together on. And so that's why I always find it really exciting to work with him, is because he really like forces me to do things in a different way. And then I'm always like really excited by how those two sensibilities, are the same, but also really clash, but make something that's interesting. And yeah, she's just incredible. And I think it's also so interesting and perhaps a comment on the time, but they were both crazy. Peter Falk's character and Gina, they were both crazy, but she got sent away to a mental institution and he gets to like stay home with the kids and do all sorts of unhinged things. So I think I don't know, it's been a long time since I've seen the movie, but I remember watching and just being completely mesmerized by her, and also being like, I think he needs to maybe go and stay in the mental institution for a little while too.
Yeah, in another episode of the podcast, me and my co-host were talking about how Cassavetes mortgaged his house to get A Woman Under the Influence off the ground.
Wow.
And just kind of the, I guess, sheer courage it took to be an independent director back then. Now indie is kind of, it can mean many things now. Indie can mean like, less than 20 million. But like back then it was like indie meant you mortgage your own house. So it's like,
Wow.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
It was worth it, in my opinion.
Yeah, one of my favorite movies, Killing of a Chinese Bookie. So we are big Cassavetes fans on the podcast, and we always kind of bring him up because we just think that he was really kind of a pioneer.
Absolutely.
Ross, one of the ones that you mentioned was Harold and Maude. What kind of drew you to that movie? And Jen mentioned that one too, actually. So you guys share that.
I think he showed it to me.
Okay, there you
go. Most of those films from like the 60s and 70s was a film class with Ross Partridge.
It captures everything about filmmaking, like just from storytelling, from character work, from just iconic Ruth Gordon character to Bud Cort's character, like just these deep, entrenched, written characters who have, two completely different worlds. That's what's so beautiful about movies, right? Two characters are in two different places and how they find, the common thread of love. And to me, that has always been what cinema captures the most, and why we all go to it, is trying to experience love in one way or another, or the lack of love in one way or another. Obviously, just the visual elements to that movie, the musical montage, having Cat Stevens incorporated into the soundtrack, which becomes iconic in itself. If you're into Cat Stevens, I guess, maybe some people are. I don't know how you couldn't be, but just the soulfulness of the music and how really calling attention to how important music is to the scape of a movie, and how it can be how music inspires the visuals, and the darkness, how the darkness can bring in such light. That movie really is about such pain and darkness, and having one moment in time that it crystallizes of some sort of hope and love. It's just I think it's a perfect movie.
Wow.
And it was also badass at the time because it was so groundbreaking and bold, and it got panned and people didn't get it, and it kind of grew into this thing where, again, how movies can last. You know, the impression of a movie can just go on for so long and actually build a life, and it lasts forever. You know, that's what's so cool about cinema.
Ross, since you like movies about love, I heard there's a really cute new rom-com on Netflix.
There is. It's actually.
It's called The Wrong Parents,
Wrong Parents,
produced by Kelly Frazier.
and I'm gonna watch it. I haven't- yeah.
Kelly, tell us about it.
Wow, that was a pretty shameless plug right there. Oh, it's cute. I developed it with my best friend who's also from Texas, and she wrote it about 10 years ago in a writing class she took for fun. She's in reality TV. And I read it back then and said, this is really cute. And so she kind of sat on it. Somebody took it out for a little bit back then. And about 4 years ago, I dusted it off and said, this is still really good, Nicole. Let's see if we can do something with it. So we brushed it up and added some things about the cowboy that sidetracked me, and some things like that from my time in Texas. And so I was able to get it in front of Netflix, and luckily they loved it. And so yeah, it came out this week.
Congrats.
Thanks.
Yay.
Thanks. Yeah, it's just a fun little silly romp. Small town Texas girl wants to go to art school in Paris, can't afford to go. Her younger sister is obsessed with dating shows and sees the next season is set in Paris. And so they do a boondoggle. She gets cast on the show, and they fly over to Paris, and they get off the plane, and she realizes they've done a bait and switch. It's Paris, Texas, which is 30 miles from where she started. So she spends the whole movie trying to get kicked off the show. And of course they fall in love. Yeah.
And then she
Spoiler
realizes,
alert,
and then she realizes
Kelly.
she's pregnant, but she doesn't know where the baby comes from. And the whole city wants the baby, right?
Right. But there's some sort of like demon in the woods that wants
like,
it also.
There's demon at the Louvre.
So it's asking you guys about your other projects now, I guess. Jen, I saw that you also were in Nope. What was that experience like? Could we hear it? Because that is another horror film that, got really popular, and a lot of people loved that movie. So
Yeah.
Can we hear a bit about that?
I had the most amazing experience working on that project. I auditioned for it, and it was like a self-tape that I sent in, didn't hear anything for weeks, kind of totally forgot about it, and then got a call back with Jordan Peele. And when I logged in to do my Zoom callback, we had a baby at the time, and asked a friend to come down to watch the baby because Ross was going to be my reader, and it ended up just kind of being a chat. And then when it came time to read the dummy sides that they had given me, Jordan said, you don't need to read because the part's already yours. And it was this like really magical, like that had never happened to me before. I was like ready to like do the whole scene and to perform, and that kind of grace and generosity and playfulness is so indicative in how Jordan approaches the entire creative process. His producer, Ian Cooper, is one of his best friends from, I think, junior high. And they are this dynamic duo where Ian is this brilliant artistic mind, and Jordan is really open to, collaborating and, letting you do a take just for you, and go ahead, try something different. Now try this. Do you have any other ideas? So it was just so fun. My part in Nope is actually quite small. It's really just that one little segment that they kind of preview at the beginning, and then they get into in the middle of the movie. But Jordan really treated it like it was the centerpiece of the whole movie, and that we were like so important. And he brought us to the studio to have a lunch, just to talk about like the family dynamics in this scene and the place that this scene has in the movie. And then we did a whole photo shoot day, and then we did a whole rehearsal day, and then we did our filming day. And then, I got to come back at the end of filming to do a little piece outside of the studio that isn't in the actual movie, but it was still super fun to come and to see what was going on. And while I was there, Jordan was like, I want to show you, I've got like the first 5 minutes of the movie already edited. I want to show it to you. So to get to like sit down and see where the creative process was going, I was just so excited to be able to be part of it. I felt really lucky.
I think that also, goes to the fact that he, like, the playfulness but the understanding of being an actor first, and Jordan was an actor, obviously. So his relationship to actors and how, even just the casting process and how he did that, just hats off to him, because I think there is something to be said about, actors who become directors. Personally, I really, I tend to love that. It feels like there's such a already built-in communication with people who understand the process and understand actors in a way that, I've unfortunately worked with some who I think don't understand that, actors are human beings and not just, you just can't tell them go point A, point B, go here, go there. Like there is a language that is inherent, and you can tell when a director is actually really understand it or they don't, I think.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that.
And keeping in this theme of talking about other roles we've had, Ross, could you tell us a bit about Don't Look Up and what it was like working on that project?
Yeah, that was crazy. It was during the pandemic, so it was in the height of all the COVID measures. So basically, I had to isolate doing that job. Originally it was I think it was 3 or 4 scenes that I was in. They didn't make the movie, unfortunately, but the experience was being on lockdown. We had to isolate in Boston. I had to stay at a hotel 2 different occasions for 9 days without leaving my hotel room each time. So our daughter was born recently. She was a year at that point.
No, she was 6 months.
6 months.
7
So I had to go off and go into Boston, and we thank God for FaceTime. We could just FaceTime and do all that. But for 9 days without, and this was at the point where it was you can't leave, you can't go, and you can't even go for a walk. So I got a little weird in that hotel room for sure. I chose to just, it was winter, so there was really nowhere to go. But the experience of working with it was a lot of big people. I was working with Melanie Linsky, who I actually have known before, but Leonardo DiCaprio and Cate Blanchett. It was pretty wild, and Adam McKay, because it was COVID, he likes to direct now, I think, with Bluetooth, and so he was in a van, and it was I just remember it being snow. There was snow everywhere, and he was just in his van, and all of a sudden you'd be on set, and you hear, "Hey Ross, can you just just kind of give one, throw it away a little bit," and you were like, where is this coming from? Because you wouldn't even, and he was in the van, like a Sprinter van in the driveway, in a warm Sprinter van, and just basically they wire him in, they plug him in. So it was kind of a surreal experience, but it was fun. The movie, there were so many people in the movie, so it was just a gigantic undertaking, I think. Yeah,
it sounds like a crazy relationship to have with the director, where they're this omniscient character.
Yeah, and people kind of got used to it, and nobody, but I wasn't prepared for it. I didn't know. Nobody, the ADs don't say, "Hey, Adam's gonna be, just piping in from a Bluetooth speaker," so just so you know. But it just comes, and you're like, and I remember just having to be like, "Oh yeah, okay," just playing it off this is cool, that's fine, I never had that happen before, but yeah, it was a fun experience for sure.
It also got us health insurance in a year where COVID shut everything down and there was no work, and it came in right at the end of our cycle, and it was like, oh, thank you, we have a brand new baby, and now we have health insurance.
Yeah,
thank you,
right.
Adam McKay.
Yeah, no, that sounds like kind of a godsend. Yeah, it's super interesting that you guys are a couple and you work on these projects together. And what kind of challenges and I guess benefits does it offer to be, in the same industry and working alongside your partner? That's such a, you guys are like Gina Rollins and Cassavetes. What is that like?
I wish.
We need more booze and drugs, though. We really do. We got to up our game. It's really great. For the most part, there's an unspoken, ease about knowing when we want to try things and we want to explore things, but just pragmatically on a familial level of we have a daughter, and so her understanding if I have to go away for a job or if I'm on set or if she's on set and she goes away, there's no competition between it. There's none of that. It's just like we know what this career is and what it takes. So it makes it much easier when your partner can absorb, like, oh yeah, I'm jumping into bed with the co-star of da-da-da-da. Like, it's, she's been there, she knows, she does it herself, so you don't have to explain it as opposed to
I still think it's disgusting though.
Yeah.
No, I think like the fluidity of being in this industry has been really helpful, especially, as Ross said, with starting a family. I mean, every job that I've done, she and Ross have come with me. And also just in the sense of like, we put each other on tape for all of our auditions. And because we are both actors and have both, directed and produced, we're really good at kind of like giving each other notes and elevating the quality of these auditions that we are submitting. And like I was saying before, like we have like totally the same tastes and sensibilities, but the way that we get to those things is so different, and that's a real benefit for when we're making stuff together. Because I think, I kind of like ground him and he pushes me out of my comfort zone. But yeah, I love working with him, and he's the only
Just
one.
Go from a hotel to a car.
I
That's
did.
impressive.
I'm on the move.
You're literally in bed in your hotel with like room service on your lap, and now you're like fully functional.
Hey, we got to keep it moving. We got movies to make, guys. We got movies to make.
That was impressive.
That's a real producer right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Places to go, people to see, deals closed.
That's right.
Yeah, that definitely offers you guys a really interesting, I think it's a strength. It sounds like a strength,
Totally.
being totally aligned on your purpose and in the same professional field, and you both want what's best for each other, and the job because you have the job. I think that's a really unique partnership that you guys
Yeah.
must have.
Yeah, and he's the only one I'll produce for, because producing is such a hard job that, after his first movie Lamb came out, which I also was on the producing team of, it was this stunning film and won a ton of awards, and people kept contacting me afterwards to be like, okay, so I've got this script. I'm like, what role do you want me to play? And they're like, we want you to produce it. I'm like, absolutely not. No way. There's nobody that I would subject myself to that for other than Ross. Sorry.
Wow. Ross, can we hear a bit about Lamb and what that process was like?
Yeah, sure. Not dissimilar to this movie. It was shot primarily in one location, but we were a little bit more loose. It was a crew of, I think, 12 of us.
If that.
10 maybe. Shot on half the budget of this, and we were actually shooting in twice as many just kind of peripheral locations. It was kind of a road trip movie that went it was supposedly in the story going from Chicago to Wyoming, but we kind of cheated Chicago for the city of Denver, so we were kind of sparse. We were in Denver for a few days, and then we were up in Wyoming and kind of just filling it out. It was a road trip movie basically about two, like I said before, two people who come from completely different. It was maybe inspired a little bit with Harold and Maude and my sensitivity to it. Two people who came from completely different backgrounds, who were at a loss in their lives, searching for love, living their lives pretty much without it, and stumble upon one another. One happens to be a 47-year-old man, the other one's an 11-year-old girl, both just kind of despondent and lost, and they end up embarking on this road trip that nobody knows about. So it becomes a very kind of controversial story of empathy and love. Another visual kind of, the poetry. It was based on a novel by a woman named Bonnie Nadzam, and I read the book and I just fell in love with it. So I adapted that, and then it drew. Jen and I had actually done a road trip across the country to Park City one year, and we ended up in Wyoming in the middle of a snowstorm in this one little town called Centennial.
Yeah.
And we ended up spending the night, and it was the most magical, beautiful place, and it just felt so open. And I kept thinking to myself, God, one day it would be beautiful just to shoot something here. And then I read this book, and it all pretty much was the route coming from, once you get out of Indiana and going towards Utah, like going up across 80, I think it is, and into Wyoming. And this book basically was the same kind of trip through there, and I read it, and I was just completely drawn to just the it was a hard story, but the depth of the emotion and what these people were, underneath what was, what was going on, as opposed to what other people's perception of what was going on.
Ross found the book at Skylight Books, which is one of our favorite little bookstores in Los Feliz in LA, and he read it and he said, I think I might be crazy, but I want to make this into a film. And I read it immediately, and I said, you're definitely crazy, we're definitely making this into a film. It's very provocative and complicated, but just so beautiful, and I think it really affected both of us, and I think it affected a lot of people who saw it. Now having a daughter, I don't know if we could make that movie again, but it was definitely the right project for us in the right moment in time too.
Had you ever adapted a book before?
I had, yeah. I worked for a film company for a few years. Back in the 2000s, I kind of stopped acting and was doing other things. And then I actually directed another film that I don't talk about because it was basically my film school, and it's not great, But I adapted originally when I was an actor and a frustrated actor, and this kind of actually somehow goes back to Kelly, I think, because of some people that we know. But I followed the rights to a book that was called Prozac Nation, and it was a really kind of daring, bold book by this writer named Elizabeth Wurtzel, about her trials and tribulations with being open about being a depressive, completely kind of manic depressive, as she was in Harvard, going to school at Harvard. And I read the book, and I was just kind of really moved, and I remember chasing the book down because Nick Nolte's company had the book, and the rights were expiring, and I just basically went after them and said, I really want to do this. Can I just have 3 months to try to set this up? And I was working with someone at the time, and we basically got the rights to the book. I adapted it in literally, I think it was like 3 weeks. And then originally we had, like, I think it was Mayor Winningham. My friend Brad was involved. Mayor Winningham was attached to direct, and we were talking to Natalie Portman. It was like this thing. So the adaptation of books to me has always been really intriguing and exciting. So I'm always kind of been searching for other material, and I still do, and I still have rights to certain things. I've adapted a couple of different books and short stories at this point, so it's something I really love to do. I think it's kind of, it really satiates the director's side because you're really just piecing it together. It's like editing, it's the initial stages of editing, really, when you get to adapt it from source material. So
that's super cool. I also have certain books that I love that I have a dream of one day adapting to something. One of my favorite books, Blood Meridian. It's I heard
didn't they do it?
Director, John Hillcoat, I think is his name. He's in the midst of it right now.
Yeah.
James Franco, I think, had the rights for a while, but never came to fruition.
I thought the Coen brothers too at one point. I feel like, obviously it feels like
people have taken a crack at it. Yeah, I think it's just one of those ones that the power of it is in McCarthy's prose and the kind of and the style. I think it's really hard to translate that to images. It's a very it's one of those books where his diction and is part of the way that you get into the world, thinking about the saddle and the type of guns they're using and all of the research that he did to put you into that, setting of in this gang of cowboys and scalpers. I think it's going to be hard to adapt that, but I would love to see it be made because it's a really powerful story, I think.
Oh, absolutely. No, yeah, it's a fine line because you fall in love with the language, right, and the poetry of the words. But the biggest, most powerful thing about film is that the less words you have, the better the storytelling is. So, I mean, I've made that, kind of made those leaps of trying to like take those types of stories, and then you end up yourself like, page 10, you're like, I just had 7 pages of voiceover. This does not work at all. Like you're trying to incorporate all that beautiful language, but people, don't need that, the actual verbal language, written language on screen. So it's hard.
Yeah. Jen, going back to Birthright for a bit,
Yeah.
and I'll ask all of you guys a version of this question, but I guess what is something that you went into the project not knowing that you learned by the end that with hindsight you wished you had known when you first set out on the project? Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you learn so much from every single experience. But I'm not sure. Maybe someone
That's
else
a big question. Yeah, something we wish we would have known before starting the project.
Yeah.
Maybe the weather patterns. We had a lot of rain we had to deal with there, especially at the end.
Yeah,
I mean, like lightning and torrential rains, but you always have to deal with that to an extent.
Yeah.
but
But
yeah,
we could have planned
But
our night shoots on evenings that were not the actual shortest days of the year.
That would have been good. That would have been
those
good.
are
Yeah,
those are the
yeah.
producerial things that Kelly and I both have probably gone through before, where you just somehow you forget, like
Yeah.
just for the sake of getting things done, and you just are like, oh yeah, it's like schedule and
That'd
things
be
like
good.
that. You're like, you don't think about oh yeah and weather.
We're
And,
gonna have, like,
oh
Yeah.
right, oh yeah,
4
thunder,
hours of
and on a
darkness.
film like this, you just like one day
Yeah.
of bad weather.
Yeah.
Like, you're
It looks
now
great
sunk.
on paper. I mean, on paper, the schedule was
We can do it,
great.
right, Kel? We
Yeah.
can do
Very
it.
organized.
We
Yeah.
can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we did
Yeah.
do it, guys.
But,
Almost
Yeah,
killed
we
us, but
did.
we did it.
We
Right.
did. We
I
did.
mean, for me, I think the one thing would be is the horror genre itself. And Shaheen and I, the DP, we talked about it a lot. Going into it, because I said we're not, huge
Horror
horror
aficionados.
aficionados, and we were just like, well, let's have our hand at this and see what happens. Realizing how much fun it is to play with the audience, and learning those things, and knowing, if we had more time, how to really could have gone so much further in the design of those elements that are they belong to the genre and people expect them, so you have that, but also just the fun that the audience loves to have, and I didn't realize that connection, and just how spirited the community is, and wanting to like give them more, because they really are a
Devoted.
group, a devoted audience of
Very
and
passionate,
they're
very
all
fun.
cinephiles, and they love it, so that's what I would have hoped, if I get to do this again in this space, that I could really take the time to really play around and have some fun. Some of the things that we came up with were kind of just in the moment, and in the design, but like
If we would have had more time and more prep, we
and
could have
just
really had more fun. But we
just
just
using
didn't
the
have it.
camera in different ways, and really playing with
Yeah.
it with the camera a lot too. So
Hindsight's
Yeah.
always 2020, and especially so with independent film, where you just, you have to, you got to kill some babies.
Definitely.
Oh, Jen. I see
let's
what you
not
did
end there,
there.
please.
By the way, that golden retriever was a really good actor.
Funny story.
Is that something that the producer has to deal with, Kelly, getting that dog and getting them to react that way?
Yes, but luckily our other producer, Jen, had a family golden retriever at the house next door. So that's Jen's parents' dog. And we also shot each of those dog scenes with 2 dogs, with my little black Chihuahua and that big golden retriever, to see which one won out. But that scene in the woods where he turns around and hears something and kind of woof, He won. He beat Charlotte for sure.
How did you get that reaction from Jen's parents' dog?
Well, here's the truth of the matter, okay? So everybody else wanted the family dog, Scout, which is the golden retriever. Is he a retriever or is he a lab? I can't remember.
He's half lab, half retriever.
Whatever, it doesn't matter.
It's a rescue dog.
Anyway, everyone
He's so
wanted
cute.
like, oh, he's just so sweet and he's so endearing. And to me, I was like, he just looks it's like Lassie, like it's just too like it's too cutesy for me. And then the only other option was because again, independent film, you know,
We weren't bringing in a stunt
we
dog.
knew we had the dog was actually an elephant. It was the biggest elephant in the room because the dog was this sequence that was a really big part of the movie, but we just chose not to talk about it because we didn't know how the hell we were going to do it, quite honestly. And when it came push came to shove, it was like, well, Kelly has her dog, and her dog to me was always very like a little skittish, you know. Like God rest Charlotte, she's beautiful, wonderful dog, but she was
sweet
small,
sensey.
sweet, and she was very sensitive, and she was always she was panting a lot, you know. And I looked at the way she was panting, and I thought, it's kind of scary, like in the sense that he's kind of nervous all the time. I can do something with that. And the other dog was just like, you know, like so sweet. And you're like, that's so everybody else was like really rooting for Scout. And I was like, let's just shoot Charlotte just in case, because I think she just looks weirder, you know, like it just looks more.
He just covered up your face with his hand.
So we shot.
He's not wrong.
She was so cute. No, she was so sweet. But I just felt her face was more like
She was less dopey.
She was more in the genre.
She was less.
She was wiser.
Yeah,
She was
she's
wiser.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah.
And
I got to get that footage though of all the. We need to put her scenes, deleted scenes in the movie.
So we
Charlotte's
shot
deleted scenes.
because we couldn't decide, and I couldn't decide. I was just like, let's just put them both in, see how they respond, and like we'll have it.
I knew.
And then when we got out into the woods with Scout, basically, we didn't know what we were going to do, and I just basically planted him where he was supposed to be, and he stood there with Wani, and I just started growling at him, like from far away, from like 20 feet, and it was just me and Scout going, and he responded, and everything was just based on, I mean, if you watch the take, it would just be like, you can't see me on camera, so it actually sounded like more like a dog than I thought. I was like, I'm a better dog actor than I thought I was, you know? But he then just responded so well that it was like, I don't think we could have gotten a dog wrangler to do that and it been successful. It was just a fluke, just an outright fluke, and we got so lucky because we had no idea how that was going to work, and it was actually a kind of a poignant sequence to the story. And again, this is the things that you do with blind ambition and just being like, somehow it'll work or we'll figure it out. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does.
I greeted them as they came out of the woods that day, and Kelly was like, you win.
Yeah.
Scout wins.
Yeah.
There's no beating that. That's it. It's over.
Yeah, that's a gamble because you don't know how, you know, an animal's going to react. And I was like, I was watching that scene. I was like, wow, that retriever is very, or I guess he's a mutt, he's a mix.
Yeah.
He was very locked on, and no matter what the actress would do to try to get him to disengage, he was always going back, and I was like, that's a good dog actor or something.
So Ross should have also gotten the credit of animal wrangler.
Yeah.
And dog actor, I guess.
Yes. Co-star.
And I think if you could, you know, we come from like this background where we used to do these scrappy little movies where we're just improvising. We never really knew what the end game was, or the story kind of had like parameters, but it was always just. So I guess it was the mentality of just being like, you know, we'll figure it out, and we can rewrite stuff. And we had the writers were willing to rewrite stuff and figure it out. But God, yeah, I think it was just luck.
Awesome. Okay, to finish up the discussion on Birthright, that final scene, you know, where the mystery is solved and it's kind of the Scooby-Doo mask off moment, and the big gunfight happens. What was that like? That must have been a pretty intense scene to shoot.
So intense.
We shot it in a couple phases, and not by choice, but Kelly's probably like, oh my God. We we marched into the woods on the shortest night of the year to try to do. We had storyboarded the sequence with. I mean, I think there was 50 setups just on the first night of that was just, and the scene was scheduled for almost 2.5 nights of shooting, and we got through a lot of it, but it was so chaotic and so fast. And you know, we're now bringing in kids. We have 20 kids. We have all their parents. We have all these people in the woods trying to go through our shot list that you can barely see in the woods, you know, having like, you know, flashlights set up just to see our shot list. And then we got through, I think, like 42 of the 50 something shots, and we got it back, and we sent it to the editor, and I was a wreck. I was like, we didn't even come close to where we need to be for the end. We have all these things. It was like, there's 2 deaths, there's a birth, there's like this sequence that on paper you can read, and then all of a sudden you're trying to shoot it, and you're trying to shoot it quickly. It was beyond our scope a little bit. And so we got there, we got the footage back. Chris made an assemblage of what we had compared to what our storyboards were for what the ending what we were trying to achieve. And I remember watching it and going, truthfully, we're fucked. This isn't even close. I don't think this is going to work at all. It looked like everything just seemed oversaturated. The kids, the costumes, I was like, this is looking like a Disney version of what this could, you know, wasn't convinced. And then we had to keep shooting knowing that we were going to come back to the sequence. And so all along I'm watching pieces of that footage and being like, I don't know how we're going to get this. So the ending was still up in the air. We went back into the woods another night. We were like, we had a great game plan. We were gonna attack it. We had a couple meetings about it because Kelly knew how I was feeling and Jen knew, and we were like, we need to really try to get more out of this and try to squeeze in more time. We actually decided to go and do a kind of like a B camera day where we went into the woods at night, just Shaheen, myself, and one of the other producers, and just kind of and just squeezed out some of the dream sequence, the first part of when they were in the woods and Ren imagines the dream. So we knocked off some of the things that were off our list that we needed to do. So we were like, okay, we got a little bit more breathing. Go into the woods. Everyone's there. We have the most torrential rain, thunderstorm, and lightning storm where we had to evacuate the woods as quickly as we could because the lightning was like,
and it kind of came out of nowhere. It was not scheduled to be that way. And then all of a sudden it's like, this storm has like taken a shift, and it's actually coming right for us. Okay, like there's lightning strikes happening like within a quarter mile of where we are. Let's get everybody inside right now.
So we were running with our ATVs, our people, like just sopping wet, and the whole night was gone. And we were like, now we're really behind, and we had to just figure out. And Kelly did some serious schedule maneuvering and figuring some stuff out, and we actually incorporated another night into it because we were now behind. And then somehow, I think the last night we shot out there, we actually felt like, okay, but we still had the very beginning of the stuff to shoot and then the end. And so the sequence, long story short is, 2 deaths and a birth could never be in one scene, probably, and on this budget, like you really gotta.
And while you're chasing the sun.
Dance around a fire.
Yeah, ritual, dance around and fire alone, just like.
And then I think the sun's coming up.
The first night we actually had a real fire, and then finally we were like, we need to pipe in fire because we need to control over it because the smoke was there. It was just, we made a lot of like, on the run, independent thinking, minded.
But we figured it out.
And we figured it out, and a lot of great editing and a lot of great shooting and fast shooting, and like it was literally just bits and pieces. And by the end, Kelly, I remember it was just like, I need a hand. We need a hand right here. We need a hand of shot of a hand. Let's go. Like throwing the camera wherever we could and hoping that you could see it. Like the reveal of Magnus was it was a little bit Scooby-Doo, like you said, and we had to duck around that as much as possible because it wasn't exactly what we hoped. But, when you got an actor in a huge headdress that's not meant for really moving very quickly or being on the ground, because he's now like his head is propped, like there's all these things that, and time is just going, and the birds are starting to chirp and the lights are coming, you're like, it was a lot. So
Wow.
those big set pieces, like we could have spent a week on that alone, and really, but that's what it is.
Kelly, what about you? Do you have something to add to that? What it was like to shoot that final scene?
I mean, it was just chaos because we knew, luckily, we had a day, I think we had a day off in between there, right? We had to give the crew a day off. So you guys were able to sit down and really, you know, just pick out exactly what you needed. So we just started picking stuff off. But I mean, we were literally running from scene to scene and piece to piece, and get some kids in here. Great. Get them out. I mean, it was now looking back hilarious, but at the time very
Right.
stressful.
Yeah, very last day, and people are tired and
Yeah.
a little more ornery, and it's just like, how do we got to just keep the train on the tracks and get to the end point? Like, we cannot be
Yeah.
complaining about, like,
Whatever, it doesn't matter. But
whatever.
Yeah.
and the things you don't think about, like you think about, oh, the sun coming up, but it wasn't even the sun that was coming up was the problem. Is the birds start well before the sun
Yeah.
comes
At
up,
like
so
three
it can
forty-five.
still be dark,
Yeah.
and you're getting these chirping birds, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh my god, you like the
Yeah.
things that you got to
Anticipate.
anticipate or think thoroughly
Or
through.
control.
Like shooting night scenes on the shortest day of the year.
Yeah.
That's on me. It's on the strike. It's on but you just,
Lesson learned.
yeah.
But you guys did it. You got it. You got the footage in the can. You figured it out. That's what counts. And
And the magic of editing. I mean, we have a great editor, and we had a great composer, and just like all those things that again, you think that's the beauty of film, right? There's so many things that you can save and salvage and figure out. It just becomes a little bit different than you expected, but that's always the case. It's always going to be different than when you set out for it to be.
Yeah.
awesome. All right, guys. Well, I think that's all my questions for you guys. If you have anything to add about the movie, or if you want to direct people where to go to watch it and support it, floor's yours.
Apple and Amazon are two of the easiest ways to rent or purchase the movie, but it's available kind of anywhere you watch VOD movies.
Nice. All right. Thank you guys so much for joining today.
Thanks so much.
Everyone go check out Birthright. And it was super fun talking to you guys and hearing about some of the behind the scenes brilliance and chaos that went into making this project.
Well, it's
Thanks
nice
for
meeting
having
you. Thanks
us.
for having
Yeah.
us.
Thank you so much for having us. Appreciate it.